All right, welcome everybody. This is the Cloud Provider vSphere monthly meeting. Today is March 6th, 2019, and we're going to go over our usual agenda items, reviewing the progress from the previous agenda, then some current status, and this month we want to do some grooming on the backlog. Ideally, we want to do this more frequently than just once a month. But for now, we're going to just stick with the current schedule and see if we can figure out issues to be done and to be included in the next release, which is supposed to be the end of this month, with I guess at the same time as the Kubernetes 1.14 release. So let me share my screen now. Let's see. And we want to share this here, I guess. Yeah, looks like it's working. So, so this is the agenda, and from the agenda last time that we got together, we had a few things around the in-tree cloud provider. Last time we got together, we just had the zone support for the out-of-tree cloud provider merged. That is in there, working fine. So good job there. An in-tree provider had a problem with the node IP that was patched for some setups where vSphere was using MAC addresses that were not recognized in the cloud provider as valid VMware MAC addresses, because apparently some of the prefix that VMware uses are not in the documentation, in the official documentation. So we had to look them up from the IE official list of MAC addresses prefixes. So apparently VMware has 4 instead of the 2 that were listed before. So we patched that. But turns out that the original patch that we talked about last time, had some unintended side effects with some setups, specifically when you're running Flannel inside your Kubernetes nodes. So we had a couple of follow-up patches to that, and it's now working. And we had 3 different patches. So the first one is the one we talked about last time. Then there were other 2 to fix all the other use cases that were basically broken by the original patch. They're all backported to 1.13 and 1.12, although 1.11.8 is missing the last patch. So so if you're running 1.11.8, there's still a possibility where you have, especially if you have Flannel running, that the node IP might be just blank if you're running Kubernetes 1.11.8. So if you're running that, please don't upgrade to 1.11.8. Just go straight to 1.12 or 1.13, or wait for 1.11.9 if that ever comes out, because it's now merged in the new release branch for the next 1.11 patch. That is pretty much it from last month. So current status, I'm going to fill in some of the blanks. We do have the intention of releasing a beta version of CCM and the CSI plugin as well at the same time, for around the same time as Kubernetes 1.14 drops, which is March 25th, if I'm not mistaken. If that is going to be the actual release date, as we saw in a few times before, the date might slip or may not, hopefully not, but it happens. So that is the target currently. So, and to do that, what I did was creating a milestone in the repo, and this brings us to the grooming part. So I kind of reorganized the milestones here. Close the old one and open a new one called V1 Beta 1. This is to I know it sounds weird because we're not necessarily using a V1 Beta 1 naming because we don't have an API to name. But given that most of the folks in the Kubernetes community are using this kind of nomenclature like V1 Alpha 1, V1 Beta 1, or V1 for stable, I kind of try to use the same naming scheme, and I just put the version number that is going to be, which is 020, which is going to be our first beta release for both CCM and CSI. And then we have just a generic next milestone where we just put everything that we're not working on for the specific, for the other specific milestone, which is V1 Beta 1 for now. So issues. Let's go over them very quickly and see if there's something that folks might want to assign to themselves. So let's just group by milestones for now, because I tried to be a little bit relaxed on the number of issues that I put in this V1 Beta 1 milestone. So if folks have strong feelings around some of these issues being pushed back to the next milestone, I'm fine. Let's just discuss that. I don't have a lot of context on CSI specifically, so Travis and David, that might help if you guys want to chime in. The first one is actually an easy one. This is the documentation on how to run CCM and CSI with kubeadm. As kubeadm is becoming more and more the standard way to deploy Kubernetes, I think it should be useful to start providing some documentation for it. I don't know if anybody on this call, I know I tried it once and it didn't work, but I didn't spend a lot of time trying to debug and figure out why it was not working. Does any of you ever try to use kubeadm with CCM or CSI?
I have not tried it yet, no.
So that might be worthwhile to give it a try if somebody wants to assign themselves here. I'll just put the help wanted here. If not, just we're just gonna.
One question I have for you, Fabio, is this came up in one of our CSI meetings, but just a point of clarification that this would be using kubeadm to deploy the cluster in a way that, for example, supports CSI. Like it's not going to deploy a CSI plugin in a container or the pods for that. It's more about setting the feature flags and everything to enable CSI. Was that correct?
Yeah. So and again, this is coming from all the background I have is from the last time I tried it, which was a long time ago now. But the idea was that you have to specify some configuration in the kubeadm command line or even config file in order to have like a kubelet started with cloud provider external. There's a bunch of other things you can do. And then you have obviously to deploy the pod through the YAML file. So I'm not expecting kubeadm to deploy the pods, the CCM pods or the CSI pods for us. Just document how, if you want to use kubeadm and you have a VM running a vSphere, you have a bunch of VMs, and you have kubeadm and you want to use kubeadm to stand up a cluster, and you want to run the CCM or CSI on top of that cluster, how do you go and provide a correct set of information to kubeadm to set up a cluster that can accept the CCM pods and the CSI pods?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
So I'm gonna just leave this here because I don't feel it's a strict requirement for V1 Beta 1. So if somebody wants to assign themselves to it, we can move it back. I'll move it back to next, but for now I'm just gonna mark it for next because apparently I know one of us has done this before. Let's see if I got back to the right one. No, okay. Here I could use some help from you, Travis or David. CSI automatically promote register existing virtual disk manager volumes to FCD.
Yeah, I'm currently working on that. That's basically, that issue captures like what our upgrade path is going to look like from the entry to external. So that's what I'm currently investigating right now.
Okay. So we're going to keep that as for V1 Beta 1.
Yes, definitely.
What about block volume support?
That should stay as well. That's one of the things I'm working on, kind of last feature I'm working on for this release. The next one, though, the vMotion SDRS, that is not on the roadmap for this release at all.
All right. So let's
and in fact, is not possible yet.
Okay, let's move it to next.
The end-to-end tests is the other thing that's on my list. I didn't mention it because it's not a feature, but that's most. It won't cover everything that we cover today. There are some issues with it, but I finally had some in-depth discussions with Andrew Kutz quite a bit about how to accomplish this, and that's my main priority for this release has been to get some public end-to-end tests in place. So that should stay as well.
All right.
What I do need to do, not part of this meeting today, but I need to break this into smaller pieces because right now it sounds like we will cover the world, and that's not going to happen. But getting the framework in place and the basic end-to-end tests in place is what I'm shooting for there. So I'm going to break that into smaller pieces.
I'm going to just do some housekeeping here.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm fine if you just reduce the scope of this issue here directly by editing it. That's fine. I'm just going to assign you to it. So I
should have grabbed it already.
All right. Shoot. All right. So this one, return descriptive VM size when calling instance type. This is something I had on my back burner for quite a while now. But I intend to work on it and intend to bring it to completion before we mark 2.0. So let's keep it that way.
Yeah, I think I made a comment on there. Like, there's a good generic way of like how you can make it easily extensible too. Like, so yeah, if it helps any. Yeah,
no, I like that, and I like the fact that we have pretty much all these already, ready to go. We just have to basically create a string out of it and just put in the instance type. I think this is going to be very helpful for people that are managing like large clusters and they want to see what the nodes look like. And I know that a lot of people using it to like keep track of the instance types on Amazon, for example, or Google Cloud, where they have the size of the instance. They know how to have like a cluster with large VMs or large instances and so on. So I think this is going to be helpful for.
Yeah, and the limiters aren't important. It's just, it's really basically easy so you can split and then in there split on each one. So it's just, yeah.
Cool. Helm chart. This is a good one. I remember work being done on this.
Yeah, actually, the pull request has been out there forever. I planned, and this actually is complete. I just need to update like the version on it. The problem is, after the new year rolled around, they used to have the SIG apps, and specifically for Helm, they used to have a charts chat. I think it was weekly or bi-weekly meeting where you can discuss issues with Helm charts. And after the new year, that completely rolled off, and now those meetings don't happen anymore. So when I get a chance, I need to go and talk, because I was planning on doing it this week and then noticed it had dropped off. So I need to go to the Helm guys or whatever and say if they're going to revive that, or like what's the other alternative to that to, express concern about outstanding chart issues. So I still need to follow up with that, but it is complete and I actually do use it, which is funny, but anyhow.
So essentially the work is complete. It just needs to be merged. And in order to be merged, you have to go talk to people, right?
Yep, exactly.
Human gating, all right. So I just gonna keep that for beta. I'm not gonna move that. I feel like there's just need just a little push to get there. So we have a couple of issues here that are kind of long-standing issues. One of them is improve the documentation for the cloud provider, and this has been something that's been there for quite some time. The problem is essentially the same, where we have the real only documentation that we have out there today is the one that is basically documenting the entry provider. I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, figuring out how to have something that we can publish, and it will be nice to just have a different landing page for documentation. So right now we do have this vSphere storage for Kubernetes repo under the VMware org, where there's documentation that is almost up to date for entry, not necessarily completely up to date. It's still valuable, I think, and I might want to ping Michael Gash on this because he probably knows a little better. I know that Miles has done some documentation efforts on his blog. I'm not sure if we want to just piggyback on this issue and say we want to have like a complete different new landing page, maybe under the Kubernetes org, maybe even under this repo. I know that GitHub has a way to have it like a separate branch with HTML documents there to just publish things as a website. But unfortunately, I'm not like very up to speed with what the documentation SIG, the SIG docs people are doing in regards to vendor or provider specific documentation. Andrew, do you know if...
Yeah, I can provide an update on this. So I think what's happening, and we're still kind of working with SIG docs on this, but what they want is for the providers to follow like a set template and a set like set headlines, whatever. And they want to essentially have a process where they like pull all the content from all the providers and then put it on a single landing page. Okay. And so I'm still working with SIG docs on like what so we have a KEP open that defines the template, but we're also like kind of changing that as we go. But I think the best thing to do would be to at least add docs based on the current template and go from there.
Yeah, because I'm worried about the current status. So the status quo is that people have no documentation on anything. I mean, there's documentation for the cloud provider, but it's in the repo, and it's a markdown document, which is great, and it's actually easy to follow. Problem is that people might just go to, I don't know, Kubernetes.io and go there and find a link that goes to this Project Hatchway documentation, which is not what they should be looking at. Also because the entry documentation is not up to speed with what is actually in there, like the zone support. I don't think it's there at all.
Yeah, so I think the intent is that the developers of the provider is gonna write in their repos with Markdown, because we just assume that that's the most friendly for developers. But then the SIG docs would be responsible for pulling that into Kubernetes.io somewhere.
Okay.
That is TBD though. Yeah.
So why don't we do this? Andrew, can you provide some background and some links in this issue here? So I'm thinking about maybe pulling, as you said, pulling the template for what is the current template today, and try to fill the blanks with the documentation for the other tree cloud provider, and maybe start publishing that on our own in this repo. So we have at least a place where we can point people to. And then once SIG docs get together with a process and whatnot, we just tell them to pull from that source of truth. And
yeah, that sounds great. So okay. I'll leave a comment here and kind of provide more context on this.
Awesome.
Just to add to that, there's an awful lot of grandfathered stuff in that documentation as well from like pre 1.8, and it just makes it so confusing. Like there's bits and pieces all over the place that really just need to be ripped out, to be honest. So yes. I think there's a lot of stuff that could be purged from it, and it could easily be streamlined into, one decent end-to-end page.
Mice, I know you've done some work on the entry cloud provider in terms of documenting the latest things and so on. Do you think it would be worthwhile to just have add documentation, like more up-to-date documentation for the entry provider to this documentation effort, and then just point people to it and removing the old link, or just keeping the old link for I don't know, historical reasons or whatever?
Yeah, so all the stuff, whenever I started looking at this, that was on kubernetes.io or whatever, any inlinks all pointed to the vSphere storage for Kubernetes, which is the Hatchway documentation. And then it was only much later that I actually found the stuff that was in tree that you guys had written along with the cloud provider itself. So just ratify it all into one place. But I think all the inlinks are into that vSphere storage for Kubernetes. So it makes sense to just reuse that one again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Well, we're definitely in control that we can send PRs to that repo as well and make changes to the documentation directly. So that would be something I think worthwhile to do. I see a lot of issues like floating around in the Slack channel as well with documentation, and most of the time people get pointed at your blog or a document inside the repo here. So and that specific piece of documentation is useful sometimes, but not useful all the time, which is, I guess, what the point of having standardized documentation is.
Yeah, I think there's some value in maybe ripping out the UX script and that kind of stuff as well, because I don't know if that works anymore. At least I've never tried to use it, but I've only ever had success setting it up manually. But the only thing about my blog is it's quite opinionated in the way that I set stuff up. So it would need to be generalized a little bit more, if it was to go into public documentation like this, where it allows for other scenarios, whereas mine is you're going to use vSAN and SPBM and this is the way you're going to do it. Whereas, it could be a bit more generic.
Gotcha. We may want to ping Steve Wong on this as well, because I know he has done some of the things. I'm going to just add a comment here and say can be Wong. All right. And okay, this is another good one, which is implement end-to-end tests using vSystem. We don't have Andrew Cutts or Hui here, but Doug, do you know anything about this? This is basically to use vSystem to test the CCM. I know we do have some tests, some end-to-end tests for CCM. I don't know if they're using vSystem at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely quite a few tests using vSystem, and David added a bunch more recently for CSI. This might have been when we had the discussion about hooking up a container to the simulator VM lifecycle. So we could actually, although that might have been for cluster API. So I mean, we can definitely take it further.
I guess that for this specific release, what I'm looking for is more of, let's get the groundwork done and and have some basic end-to-end tests using vSystem, and then we can expand further. Like, I'm not looking for something super complete. I think this issue originally was written when there was no test at all. So I think the idea behind this was to just have like the initial work done to get some vSystem tests. And I feel like this is maybe already completed. David, do you want to maybe take a look at this issue and see if what you've done with regards to vSystem actually fits the bill here?
Yeah, actually, I was just about to comment. Like after I did the CSI, like the vSystem testing and stuff like that, I also added in the subsequent pull request, added vSystem testing for the cloud provider too. So it's actually, both of them are actually very, very complete right now. They already, like, for CCM and CSI, they already test zones and stuff like that. So it's very complete. I mean, I actually got to a point where, like, I don't know what else I could probably throw at it. I also remember around this time that this was being discussed, the end-to-end test, that we were thinking about actually hooking up to real infrastructure in Amazon, you know, in our configuration up there. I don't know if that's captures this or if that's a part of this or not, but
this is just for vCSIM. So if it works on vCSIM, then it fits the bill. So
yeah, so it's fairly complete now.
Yeah.
So it does test most aspects of that. Yeah, even threw in vCSIM tests against like stuff that's not really technically our code, but it does exercise it, and it's like a more higher level, like some of like the instance interface testing and stuff like that. So I mean, even that's there. So it's pretty complete at this point.
I think we'll just one other thing, the third checkbox on there about making a new job in test infra, I think that's even covered. It's not done separately, but all these are just done as part of make test, and that's already tested on every PR. So I think that's even in place as well.
Yep,
Awesome.
that most definitely is.
Why don't we just leave a comment here, like just giving a current status of what's going on, and then we decide if we can just close the issue. Because it feels like there's, it's basically already implemented. It's just a matter of, it's probably left there because it was open on August 8th, so it's been a while since it was written. So maybe things have changed and we just simply did not garbage collect this before.
And I will say from the CSI perspective, I mean, when I think of end-to-end or ETE, I don't think of using vCSIM. I think of using real infrastructure. So when we're talking about connecting to AWS, that's the work that's coming for CSI, but it's not going to cover much for the cloud provider, I don't think. But
this is actually just for CCM. So this was specifically for CCM. I don't think we actually had CSI at the time when we wrote this. So this is just covering like cloud provider.
Yeah, I think you're good here. Okay.
Yeah, and actually just on that note, Travis, since you brought it up, if you do, actually have tests on physical infrastructure, if you're going to do have like an end-to-end test for zones, it's going to have to bite off the zones for CCM in order to do the correct placement in the cluster, right? So it'll get both eventually.
Yeah, they do go hand in hand. You're right.
All right, looks like we're in a good place with that. The last one we have is the CCM documentation is specified in CAP 2, which is probably out of date right now because I don't think CAP 2 still exists. Is that, Andrew, do you have any feedback on this?
I think we can just mark this as a duplicate to the last one.
Yeah, let's just close this down. And 41. So let's just say 41. All right, and that's all for grooming. Looks like we're in a pretty good place. All right, we're actually 3 minutes over. I'll see you guys in a month from now. Probably going to have, starting next month, probably going to have this meeting bi-weekly instead of monthly, but we'll figure that out next time. Thank you all.
Thanks, Fabio.